Know the stage of where your prospect is in. Leverage tools that are out there, like on LinkedIn, calling friends that you're connected with. But definitely know and do the research. Intelligence is like gold.
Look at who you're marketing. So if it's a business to business, you're going to use a different strategy than if you're going to a business directly to a consumer. So both approaches are completely different than one another, yet still the same as one another, because it's all about relationships and how do you build those relationships.
You got to get really clear on what the problem is that you solve, and then either somebody needs it or they don't. If you can solve a high-end problem, the more complicated it is, the more that you can really get some outrageous money.
Sales intelligence is very significant, and you need to know who it is that you're going to contact. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Business Lunatics, the show where we have four fearless loonies. We pull back the curtain on the wild, the wonderful, and sometimes downright ridiculous world of entrepreneurship. Because no question, we get around with no fluff, no BS. It's pure business madness, because that's where you have to be if you're going to be an entrepreneur. On that note, we've had several episodes on lead generation. We're going to take it to the next step, which is going to be about the sales process. And what do you do when the lead comes in? That's the question. And on that note, I'm going to start off this time instead of passing it on to one of the other loonies. And I'm going to suggest that we need to do some research. It's a specific company and a specific individual that's coming and saying, I want to talk to you. Now, do you pick up the phone or do you find out more about them? So you go to that person's LinkedIn profile, you go to their company website, you go to their company LinkedIn profile, you look at their posts, you look at that individual and what did they post? What is it what service or products do they manufacture or provide? This is the process that I would take, is to first understand who it is I'm going to call.
Yep.
And we need to take a little, maybe dig it a little deeper. Like, for example, on LinkedIn, how many people are they connected to that you're connected to? And is there a way that you might be able to gain additional intelligence? And I do call this sales intelligence before you make the phone call. This way you're understanding who it is that you're talking about, and you customize the sales call, if you want to call it a call. Maybe in some cases you're going to do an email and suggest a virtual coffee so that you can meet with them. But before you actually meet with them, either on Zoom or by phone, or what is it that you're going to say? And who is that person that you're talking to? And I seem to remember, Steve, maybe you mentioned this to me moons ago, where you're doing, and I hope I'm not getting this confused, where you're doing research on an individual and you're learning about their personality using Claude. Yep. Am I right? You mentioned that to me, right?
That's one way, but I actually use a product called Humantic.ai.
Oh, that's right.
And it actually goes out and it'll tell me, and I'm going to hide this person's name and face because I'm going to be talking to him soon. This is a report on somebody that I actually printed out of a company I've been chasing since March. So I'm hiding all the goodies. But the reality is, I want to know everything I can about this CEO and his company and every employee. And I'll do things like I'll go look through who I'm connected through. And if I'll see somebody I'm close to, I'll call them. Tell me about this person. What can you tell me about them? Oh, they just had a baby. Great news. I congratulate them when I give them a call. I mean, exactly. You can get such great nuggets out of just ask people for information. People love to talk. They're dying to give it to you. That's for sure. But it's Humantic AI is what I use. Excuse me. It's not very expensive.
But if I remember correctly, you were taking the Humantic AI information, you were feeding it into Claude too, right?
Yeah.
I seem to remember you were getting a few layers there.
Yeah, I gotta get an extra layer. What I'll do is I'll measure it against someone else who's also has the same discourse. So this tells you their ocean profile, their disc profile. It tells you how to talk to them. It tells you how to cold call them. It tells you how to send an email. It tells you how they like to be spoken to. I mean, it's crazy. It's pretty deep, detailed information, and they're gathering it from digging in and around LinkedIn and reading their messages and seeing how they respond and understanding who that person's persona is.
Yeah, I think this is again, I'm going to use the same words again. This is what I call sales intelligence. The sales intelligence could be at the company level, but more importantly, since you have an individual who said, "I want to talk to you," they have become a lead. Now you need to do the sales intelligence on the individual, and then customize the entire process.
Yeah.
The conversation, the way that you will talk to them. What you're going to say. It's not just about your products and your services. You need to be able to um, formulate that conversation in a way that it's going to be comfortable for that individual.
And it
Um,
depends on the lead. I
Well,
mean, like,
but it,
if it's a warm, a cold, just one second and I'll shut up. If it's a warm, a cold, a hot lead, but the point is, this person that I'm going to be meeting with, I stopped talking to them in March because I was like, okay, when you're ready, you'll call me, you'll reach out. They happens to be a fellow Skelly Gup client, okay, or a coach rather. So
mhm.
I know this person. I don't know him super well. I've seen him at a couple conventions. We've talked. What can I do? Now he's ready. He wants to talk and find an AI guy. So that's a super hot lead in my mind. But I still
I
want
agree.
to do the same research I would do if I had somebody that just, was a hot lead because the more you know, the better off you are. And I'm sorry, Freddie, after you.
All
no,
right,
but
Freddie.
but I think what needs to be cleared up is what you guys both are talking about is B2B, business to business.
Mhm.
That doesn't
Mhm.
work when you're going to business to customer. Okay. That whole approach, you can't do that because there's no research because you got Mary Lou that's calling
Yeah,
you.
right. The lead
She
is the consumer, right? I agree.
is to lead the consumer. So that whole, so we need to really be clear about because they're two completely different approaches. If you're dealing with business to business, yeah, you need to do the research of who the players are and everything else. If
Very true.
you're a remodeler going to John Smith for his plumbing, all that's out the window. So
So what do
True.
you
that's a whole, well, you typically you want to start asking questions of what's the issue that they're having, how did they hear about you, why did they contact you, and a multitude of different things. You're solving a problem. Usually when a consumer is contacting you, they've got an issue. They either got a washer that's not working, they want to get remodel their bathroom, they got the plumbing is plugged up, the pipes are plugged up, they're looking for a landscaper. They're looking for a pool cleaner. They're looking for, a power
Something, right.
washer.
It's very specific. And it's usually not going to allow them, they're not waiting days for you to contact, for them to
No,
contact
because
you.
it's first one who responds wins usually.
Yeah,
And I've closed more sales because I was Johnny on the spot because
right.
I responded quickly. And so it really depends. Like when I was working with the language services company several years ago, I was dealing with both sets of groups because there would be individuals that needed a birth certificate or a marriage license that needed to be translated from a given language into English, or that was a person that needed an interpreter for a court situation, or I was dealing with a state agency. I was dealing with a business that was training some of its personnel, and the personnel were the landscapers for a hotel chain. And so those people needed a Spanish interpreter. So again, you got to be able to be flexible upon who the market is and the approach you use based upon who you're targeting or who's contacted you. Because if it's a warm lead, like an introduction, sometimes it's just a phone call. You get a phone call from someone that says, "Hey, Steve says I need to reach out to you." And so first off, you say, "Okay, great. Steve's a great guy, blah, blah, blah." And then it's okay. What can I help you with? And you ask questions. Questions is really the secret to really creating a great sales experience.
But this is a good segue into some of the things that Rochelle mentioned before
I'm
we
going to take
started.
this. I'm going to turn. We're going to turn the car. We're going to do a U-turn. Okay. Before you do any of what you taught, we're U-turning this immediately. I'm going to look at it a little differently. I want to know very often, and this is where I come in with all my clients, not one, not two. How about every single one? Companies have a very hard time talking about their business in a compelling way. Very often they are long-winded, boring, and sound like everybody else. And I always say, when you talk about your business, are you storytelling or boring telling? Did you tell me a story about what you're doing, the problem that you solve, the high-level thinking that you have, so that the person that you're dealing with understands your level of expertise? Okay, I deal with so many companies that have very high level thinking, and because they talk about what they do like average guy down the road, they can't get the fees that they're entitled to. They don't attract the high-end client that they're looking for. They've downgraded their entire organization because they don't have a great way of explaining what they do. So
Well,
when you
but wait a
find
minute,
it,
wait a minute. Are you going to a cold prospect? Because if I'm getting a warm referral that says you need to contact Mike, that is the plumbing guy, because he's a great plumber and he's done my stuff. Mike doesn't need to sell himself
he
whatsoever
still has, I believe everyone has
because he's already
to sell.
being a warm referral and
Doesn't
the
matter.
and
If my
the
price is if my price is $100 and somebody else is 75, if they're going to be price shopping, then I do have to tell, why am I getting more money? What is my high level of expertise? The person that might have referred me doesn't know the difference. They don't know. They may not know my pricing. They don't know the difficult problems that I solve. They just have a generic way of speaking about it. And they say, you know what, call Rochelle, see what she has to do. But if we can't really explain on a high level I'll give you one last metaphor and we'll go from there. I believe that there are two types of architects. There's an architect that puts up a four-family house, nothing wrong with that. Then there's an architect that puts up a skyscraper like the Freedom Tower in New York, the Sears Tower in Chicago. Bit of a difference. There's a bit of a difference in level of expertise. There's a bit of a difference. There's a massive difference in pricing. So what I'm saying is I've got so many clients that have what I call Freedom Tower expertise, but they describe themselves like they're doing this four-family house in downtown Brooklyn.
Well,
Big difference.
that's a matter of respecting yourself for the value you provide. Like I got
It's
40
being
years
able
as
to
an engineer.
articulate. Respect has nothing to do
Yeah.
with it. It's being able to articulate, to tell that high-level
But
story.
believe it or
Why
not,
am
there's
I
a lot
entitled?
of people that don't have the right mindset to believe that they deserve or they're deserving of that better
That's
rate.
a
That's a
whole
whole other
different caliber.
conversation.
That's a
right.
whole different category.
Oh
We're
yeah,
not
that's
on
a
But
the
whole
I'm
other
gonna bring us back to
conversation.
I'm gonna bring us back to sales, gang,
I got a joke
because
for you.
sales.
Let's
Number
get
one, can you talk about what you do in a very effective way? Number two, what's your positioning? Are you high level, mid level, low level? Are you a business that does volume like Walmart,
well,
where your
I think we
profit
want to
margin
stay
is
on the
very
what do you
low?
do with a lead when you get that lead?
right, and that's where we're
I
veering
think
off a little bit. So let's get
yeah,
back
I think
to
we
the
got to
lead
stay
because
on that.
let me share a story here. For example, when I was with the language services, because that was just a couple of years ago, one of the things I would share with someone that called is the fact that the business had been in business for 30 years. I would name drop some of the customers. We're working with this hospital. We've got the Attorney General's office that we provide document translation services. We work with this charity. So I would name drop some companies that we were working with to position ourselves as a premier language communications organization. So that's the first off is to build to reemphasize the credibility of who we were. Part of that conversation is how did they find out about us? Was it referred? Was it through the website, etc.? So I knew where they came from and who to thank if it was a referral. Okay, so that's all part of the whole conversation that you're having with them. And then the next part is why do they call? What's their need? What are they after? And so you got to start asking those questions, and then you find out, well, okay, I'm looking, we've got a training that we're doing, and we need, this is a Marriott was the customer, okay? And Marriott wanted to train its personnel on some different company policies. So they needed an interpreter that could speak Spanish, come in and be able to do a presentation to their landscaping team. So once I knew all that stuff and they had contacted us, they found us through the website. So I re-emphasized what a great company we were, and then we talked about the pricing, and then basically I closed the deal on the phone and got the thing scheduled. And that was a business to business. But again, if someone is contacting you with a need for a service, they're ready to do business.
It's
They're
your
just
job
looking for
not to mess that up. It's your job not to
exactly.
drop the ball on that one. And
But yeah.
okay,
But I think what Rochelle is saying is that you need to know what you're going to say, right? I mean, Rochelle, you're talking about
yeah,
how do you present yourself?
Right.
this
That's
is
what I
my
just
story.
described. That's what I just described.
This is exactly speaking to what you're saying about Rochelle. I 1,000% agree. I got a referral from one network to someone that was putting out a bid for AI work. Okay. And it fit right up my alley. I even like talked to ChatGPT and it's like, yep, you are perfect for this. You can do all of these things they're listing. And I was like, I knew that, but I want to hear you say it. But the point is that I got after weeks and weeks of not hearing from them, I got a call that they want to talk to me and have a meeting with me. So what's the first thing I did? I went back and I looked at the notes. I looked at the RFP. I looked at the bid. I looked at what did I send to them. I looked at who did I refer to them. I started doing my research. I started like making sure that even though they're already a warm lead, now they're a hot lead. It doesn't matter. They were a cold lead before when I first met them and I proposed to them. That I did my research then and I validated my RFP, hit every single thing on their bid, and I even did a red tag test to make sure through two different LLMs because sometimes they hallucinate. We all know that. But that's exactly what I did, Rochelle. I used the understanding who I was talking to, what they like, what they want, what they don't want. I spent the extra time. I haven't won the bid yet. I'm very hopeful. We'll see.
So, Rochelle, your approach, does it make a difference if it's B2B or B2C? Because we talked about that a little bit ago.
No, you've got to see. I normally don't talk about, like, if somebody says, like, what do you do? I never say that I'm quote unquote a business coach. Because there's 1,000 and nobody understands the level of expertise. So when you say my name is John Smith, I work for ABC, let's say, services. I'm in Midtown Manhattan. I'm doing it for 25 years. I couldn't care less. It's the worst thing you can do. That's number one. Because you blend. You just blend it. I don't know your level of I know nothing. Now, here's something that I want to be really careful about. I'm going to have a very different opinion about this. I'll tell you this right now. I don't agree with telling anybody you're doing anything for 30 years. Because to me, that's positioning yourself like the Flintstones and not the Jetsons, unless you told me why.
I
If
think
you
the
told
Jetsons
me
are older.
if what your future you're in the past, not in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, if unless you tell me why. If you've said I've seen down markets, up markets, markets that haven't even been identified, and let me tell you, I stand here as a business warrior. Okay. But if you, because years ago, when you said something for the amount of time, it gave you credibility. Today, in my opinion, it doesn't necessarily do that. Why? Because people that are being in business for 50 years call me. They say, Rochelle, we can't innovate. We can't, your people are very resistant to change. And because they've been doing something for an extended period of time, they're stale and stagnant. So I want to know the problem that you solve. So if you say that when say people reach out to me because they struggle in three areas: innovation, decision making, and implementation. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Implementation is priceless. And an idea without implementation, I call a hallucination. And I work with the most fascinating, hallucinating business owners in the city of New York. They all laugh. They say, I'm a hallucinating business owner. You're going to talk to me and help me with it with implementation? Let's do it. So they know the
Right.
Yeah,
problem that I solve. They
and
get
I'll
the
tell you,
problem that I solve.
Yeah, and in the marketing world, or at least if you're a marketing agency, it's all about that process. What you call implementation, I call process, because we're putting a process together when it comes to uh, executing a plan, right? I mean, when we talk about a marketing strategy, you're talking about marketing plan, it's about the process. And so what differentiates us from every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there that says I'll provide a service and execute a task, which is what most people do in the marketing world. Um, our differentiator is we have a process, we have the means to understand the strategy, what the activities are, what the tasks within the activities are, and subsequently, how do we measure the activity along the way of this process and this cycle? And so, yes, I would agree with you that implementation can be a differentiating factor when he's talking to a prospect.
People know, in my opinion, at least my companies, they know what to do. They don't do what they know. They're not in the mood. They don't want to,
And
when I have a list, like a laundry list, like they're not in the mood. So if you're not in the mood and you don't want to do it, now what? But again, what's your sales pitch so that so somebody knows I'm really weak in implementation. Rochelle's going to support me in that. People ask me, what
something,
am I? And I always tell people that I define, I'm the compassionate drill sergeant. You know what? You don't want to do it. We're going to work together. We're going to get this done. But they get a clue of what I do for them, with them. So
but
again,
you need,
what are we offering? What's our sales pitch? What are we offering that
I
somebody
think you
I
says
think we're
need,
we're on
past,
point?
you
but in
need,
some cases we're past that.
we are, but I'm just saying to address that right just for a second, there are different pitches for different parts of where you are. Hear me out. If I first meet somebody,
100%.
they're cold, I'm just going to say we mitigate risk and reduce exposure from AI sprawl in regulated companies. That's all I got to say. I don't got to say my whole big spiel, which is how we do it and why we do it and who we serve. And, that's like for a later day. But for a new client, a new prospect, it's we mitigate risk and we reduce exposure from AI sprawl from regulated organizations, basically.
Yeah, I think Freddie has made some interesting points so about the B2C world. And so
Yeah,
if you are,
true.
your plumber, your roofer, your
I just don't live
electrician,
there.
yeah, I
Right,
know.
but
But
you
Freddie's
got to
got
be
some
able to address
experience in
both.
that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because there's the other thing is, for example, you know, you mentioned that, I don't care if you got 30 years, Rochelle, but the reality is if I'm dealing with a hospital that's got multi locations, they want to deal with and give a contract to a company that's got been around for a couple of days that shows that they've got staying power. And I've landed some pretty large hospital contracts for language services because of that, because of the fact that we've been around, and more importantly, they do, they look at it
But
when
it
we.
all goes back to knowing your client, knowing your
Well,
prospect,
that's
knowing the
right.
stage you're in, knowing. It's all about intelligence. At the end of the day, you want to be good at sales, know your intelligence. Have it down.
Yep,
Whatever this
yep.
intelligence is.
Well, it's the same thing. I
Whatever
mean,
you need to be intelligent about.
I did RFPs for the state of Arizona, for example, and we won RFPs for, language services, and because we provided the tools, and landed the Department of Real Estate, the Department of OSHA, and the Department of Healthcare, which are some pretty large departments. And they're looking at companies that are stable, that have been in business more than 5 days, and understand their needs, and can basically step up and have the capacity to deliver the needs that they need and the volume that they need. So there's a multitude of different things that you've got to put into that conversation. And so, yes, you need the intelligence. Yes, you need the planning, but you need to have your story of why you want to be dealing with me. And you also need to be able to position that to why you're better than the competitors, because they're going to be looking at the competitors. So
I'm
Okay.
if you're clever, you'll also set up the competitors to step into a landmine.
I have
So
a
anyway,
funny one about.
I have an
Okay,
interesting
let's keep
meta.
going.
I want to give me 1 second. So let's pull this back to the Flintstones and the Jetsons approach, okay? Which I love that, Rochelle. That was a great analogy.
I've got a
But if we
great one
think,
about that. Let me give you the greatest example about
yeah,
prehistoric versus futuristic. I have a
okay,
90-year-old aunt. Okay, I took her yesterday um, to the doctor. She's got colitis. Let's not even go down there. So she may need surgery. Okay. So this particular surgeon, she is relatively young. Not is she young. I mean, I can't even tell you how young she is. She looks like a Barbie doll. I got a little nervous. Okay, she's that young. But what was she talking about? When she goes into surgery, she's doing this, let's say 4 years, let's say, but she's all about robotics. Robotics. That's what they're doing today in surgery. She's not
Yep.
sitting there with the scalpel. She's robotics. She's all now. If you're going to go to an older surgeon, he's going to look at her and say, "What the hell? What are you crazy? I'm doing this for 30 years." Yes, you're doing it for 30 years by hand. Now, if I had to choose right now, if I'm going into surgery, I'm going to take this lady that's like relatively young, only doing it for 3 years because she's got this new technology that seems to be reducing the dilemmas more than anything. And she's not doing it long, but she's futuristic. She's not
right,
using
but
equipment from
Well,
God knows what year.
but
yeah, but
what happens if that guy, 1 second, real fast, what
yeah.
happens if that 30-year-old person is current and is using robotics?
If he is current and using robotics, that's fine. But I just find that I
Well, who
find
would
that
you go
people
with?
that are doing
Who would you
something,
go with?
I'm not sure.
All right,
Yeah.
fair
Not
enough.
sure.
Fair answer.
It depends on
Absolutely
the
not
Fair
sure.
answer.
personality.
That's where it goes
Not
next.
sure.
Bedside
Do you
matter. That's
trust
what
them?
it
You want
depends
to
on.
know how current is somebody in what they're doing, not how long they've done it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. The
Right.
time
All
frame
right,
But
may
it,
not
Melih,
be
you
relevant.
were going to
but
say
I,
something that
but
everybody
I
kept
love,
interrupting you. So
guys, I love the conversation is great. And I love this concept of the Flintstones and the Jetsons. So if we think about the Flintstones, right, we're talking about experience. We're talking about, and I say this loosely. I'm referring to our conversation here today. We're talking about experience. We're talking about industry depth or knowledge depth, and we're talking about uh, being battle tested, for lack of better words, right? If we're talking about the Jetsons, we're saying, hey, we got tools, we have systems, we have intelligence, we have automation, and we are forward looking, but as we just talked about, in the scenario of let's say a physician or a surgeon, we're saying that hey, it depends on the situation, right? If we go out of the medical industry, which I have to admit is very different than what I would say a lot of businesses run into on a day-to-day basis, we're still going to try to take a look at this whole process of um, like for example, some of Rochelle's examples that she mentioned earlier, it sounded to me like you've got companies who are evolving or are stuck. In other words, they're stuck because they're in the Flintstones. They're evolving because they're thinking like the Jetsons, right? And so the question is, how does an organization move forward in today's world, utilizing knowledge and experience as part of their process, while they are trying to figure out how they evolve. But the evolving, that's where the four of us, come into play.
Support. You
We're the
can't do
ones
it on
helping
your own.
those companies evolve.
Change needs support. Courage needs
Right.
support.
I
You
agree.
need
I agree.
courage in order to change. I mean, for somebody taking on something that's totally different and alien and they're challenging their comfort zone, they need support. Change needs support. Courage needs support. Growth needs support. Because I believe if they could have done it by now, they would have. Now and not only that, with support, you reduce the time. On my own, if I figure this
Of
out on my
course.
own, I can't live long enough. If I work with somebody, it reduces the time, and time is really valuable because that's where your money comes in. If you're gonna have a paycheck coming in 3 months or 10 months, hello, where would you choose? So again,
And on that
support
note of time,
your add
You
on
can't
time.
get it back.
let's let's start wrapping it up and start with takeaways, and we'll start with Steve and work our way through.
So for me, I'm going to say know the stage of where your prospect is in. Leverage tools that are out there, like on LinkedIn, like calling friends that you're connected with, or use a product like Humantic. I don't get anything to say them. It could be Ebby AI, who's another one that's out there that's pretty hot. Whatever, but definitely know and do the research. Intelligence is like gold.
Yep.
Freddy.
Look at who you're marketing. So if it's a business to business, you're going to use a different strategy than if you're going to a business directly to a consumer. So both approaches are completely different than one another, yet still the same as one another because it's all about relationships and how do you build those relationships, whether it's in a business environment or whether it's a consumer environment. It's how those relationships are built.
Rochelle.
I just want to, you got to know what problem you solve. You got to get really clear on what the problem is that you solve. And then either somebody needs that or they don't. And if you can solve a high-end problem, the more complicated it is, the more that you can articulate your level of experience with the level of complication, you can really get some, outrageous money. So you got to know what the problem is that you solve.
And I'm going to go with it doesn't make a difference if it's the Flintstones or the Jetsons. I love that, Risha. I love the analogy earlier in the show. I'm gonna go with Steve's approach, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that where's my business been for the last 40 years. Bottom line is, from my standpoint, sales intelligence is very significant, and you need to know who it is that you're going to contact. And on that note, everybody, thank you very much for joining us this week on Business Lunatics. Hit follow, hit subscribe, and join the loonies next week for more no fluff, no BS, and just pure business madness. Thank you very much for joining us today.